In the far corner of the galaxy where the stars hung closer and brighter than anywhere Daniel had ever seen, a great summit had been called across the civilizations of known space, every species from dust dwellers of the red moons to sentient crystalline minds of the Anderbelt had arrived in massive ships shining with colors unknown to Earth science. Among them stood Earth's small but proud vessel, a sleek craft with minimal weaponry and maximum curiosity, carrying a team of diplomats, researchers, and scientists sent to represent a planet still new to the galactic table. Daniel was an engineer, not a diplomat, not a warrior or a politician. Just someone who understood machines and patterns, someone who could take apart broken systems and put them back together in better ways. He had no interest in alien politics or interstellar drama, but the summit wasn't just about treaties and trade routes. It was also a showcase of cultural events, and among them was one particular announcement that drew more attention than any political speech could. The Queen of Velari stood at the center of the grand hall, a circular chamber built from floating crystals and moving light. Her skin shimmered like molten gold, her eyes deep as black oceans, and her presence commanded silence. She was tall, graceful, and strange, but not frightening. She was beautiful in a way that defied species and logic. The hall fell into complete silence as her voice echoed not through microphones, but directly into every mind present. Soft and strong at once, she said, "I issue a challenge, not of war, not of conquest, but of courage and truth. Before me lies the box of the first builders, sealed since the age when stars were still young. Whoever dares to open it and succeeds shall earn my hand in marriage." The crowd exploded in noise, gasps, laughs, murmurs of disbelief. Questions swirled in every language. Could it be real? Was it symbolic? Was it a trap or a game? But the queen did not explain further. She simply turned and walked away, leaving the shimmering box upon a levitating pedestal in the center of the chamber. Box was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. It was black and silver, but constantly shifting like a puzzle locked in motion, smooth on one side, textured on the other. No visible openings, no buttons, no wires, just pulses of dim blue light flowing across its surface. It looked old, but not damaged, ancient, but still alive, as if waiting for something or someone. Daniel felt a strange pull toward it, not because of the queen or the promise of marriage, but because of the box itself. It looked like technology forgotten beyond time. Something built with purpose, something that did not belong in a display. He approached it slowly while other species kept their distance. Some laughed dismissively, some eyed it with suspicion. Only a few seemed genuinely interested. Spent hours observing it, sketching its surface patterns, recording the light flow in his wrist device, measuring faint magnetic fluctuations around its base. The box responded to none of it, yet he could sense it wasn't dormant. It was listening, or maybe watching. That evening, as stars rotated slowly above the summit dome, Daniel stood at the edge of the terrace, staring into the sky. His thoughts tangled not in romance, but in wonder. When he heard soft footsteps behind him, he turned and saw her, not in royal robes, but in simple clothing, still glowing slightly from her natural skin light. "You studied it," the queen said. Her voice was quiet, now lacking the echo of ceremony. "I did," Daniel replied, "not for the challenge, but because it speaks to me in a way I can't explain." "Few say that," she replied. "Most see only the surface, the reward or the fear, but you look deeper." "Why?" "Because I think it's not just a test, it's a message, maybe even a lock waiting for someone who doesn't want to win, but wants to understand." The queen smiled faintly, a sad smile, almost her eyes unreadable. "Perhaps you are not wrong. The box was not made by my people. It was gifted, or perhaps abandoned. We have never opened it. Though we have tried over generations, it has chosen none. It only reacts to certain emotions: curiosity, honesty, sometimes even grief, but never pride, never hunger." "Why the marriage promise then?" Daniel asked softly. "To draw out the true ones," she said. "Those who come for power are always rejected. Those who come for meaning sometimes get a glimpse." They stood in silence for a moment, the wind light against their skin, the stars turning slowly like the gears of a forgotten machine. Then she said, "Be careful, human. Many have tried. One was injured last year when the box pulsed and threw him back. We do not know why it reacts how it does." Daniel nodded. "I'm not trying to win anything. I just want to talk to it, if that makes sense." "It does," she said, then turned and left again, not with the power of a queen, but the quiet grace of someone who carried more than she could speak. The next day, the box was surrounded by guards, but not blocked. Anyone could try if they wanted to. Many did. Most failed within seconds. Some touched it and felt nothing. Some pressed against it, and it sparked and repelled them. One alien shouted ancient words and fell unconscious. Another cried before even placing a hand, as if the box had shown her something terrible. Daniel waited, watched, and finally stepped forward, not during the crowd's cheers, but in a quiet moment, when few were looking. His hand hovered above the box, not touching, yet just close enough to feel the hum, not electric, not mechanical, but like a soft vibration in his bones. His breath slowed, his mind emptied, and he whispered, "I don't want anything from you. I just want to understand." Then he touched it, and for a brief second, the box lit up. A single thin blue line traced across its side like a heartbeat, then faded. Room fell silent. Every eye turned toward him. Guards stiffened. The queen, who had been watching from above, stood slowly, her expression unreadable. Daniel stepped back, breathing hard, not out of fear, but out of awe. It had responded. Just a little, but enough to change everything. He had touched something ancient, and it had listened, and somewhere deep in the memory of the box, a mechanism shifted quietly, readying itself for what was to come. The halls of the summit whispered with rumor, as if every wall had grown ears, and every voice turned into a breeze that carried secrets. Across chambers, no one spoke openly, but everyone knew what had happened. The human had touched the box, and it had answered, even if just for a second. That moment was enough to shake the stillness of tradition, enough to rattle the calm arrogance of the galaxy's oldest civilizations, because the box had never done that before. Not in centuries of trying, not for royals, not for warriors, not for scholars, but now for a quiet human engineer who had asked for nothing and expected even less. The light had blinked like a pulse, like breath, like the beginning of a long-forgotten code awakening. Daniel found himself watched everywhere. He went, not openly, not with crowds or cameras, but with glances from behind pillars, soft footsteps that paused when he turned, faint murmurs in languages he could not translate, even some from his own Earth delegation looked at him differently, now not with pride, but with worry, because political tension was a fragile thing, and a human suddenly being the center of an alien tradition was a thread that could snap the balance. He avoided crowds, spent most of his time in the observation wing, where old machines hung from the ceilings like relics, and floating models of long-dead stars spun in silent orbit around holographic museums. But even there his peace did not last long. One afternoon, as he sat in front of an ancient engine diagram sketching something unrelated to the box, someone entered the quiet space without footsteps or noise, just presence. And when he looked up, she was there again. The queen was not wearing her formal garb again. This time she was dressed in a woven coat of soft green light, with silver threads that flickered like running water. She stood still, arms folded behind her back, eyes not directly on him, but on the floating engine, as if she too came just to study. "So you came here to escape," she said quietly, her voice still smooth, still regal, but gentler now, without the pressure of ceremony. "I came to think," Daniel replied, "and maybe to hide, but mostly to think. The box does that to people," she said. "It plants something in their thoughts, and it grows if you let it." He studied her carefully, trying to understand. Her presence was not what he expected from royalty. There was no arrogance, no distance. She stood near enough that he could see the slight rise and fall of her breath, the small glimmer in her skin like starlight trapped beneath the surface. "Why does it exist?" he asked softly. "Not just the box, but the challenge, the marriage, the ceremony. Why do this every generation?" She looked at him, and in that look was a mixture of duty and sorrow. "It is said to be a tradition of my bloodline," she explained. "The first queen of my people was given the box by a dying race called the First Builders." It was not explained, only that it would one day choose and when it chose the one who opened, it should be joined with the Queen, so that our race would evolve in some way, not just in technology but in paths. Oh, it's not just about marriage, Daniel said. It's a catalyst. Yes, she replied, the marriage is symbolic, but the joining is real. The box is not only a key, it is a guide. It binds itself to one who can carry its vision forward. Daniel let her words settle in his mind, then asked, have you ever wanted someone to open it? For a moment her gaze dropped, not in weakness, but in memory. I used to dream of it, she said. When I was younger, I believed that someone would come not to claim me, but to complete something I could not reach alone. But then time passed, and no one ever succeeded, and I began to think it was just a myth, a story built around silence. And now, Daniel said, now that it responded even a little, now she whispered, I do not know what to think. They walked slowly then through the quiet museum wings, past models of old starships and empty armor suits from wars long forgotten, and as they moved, she told him of her people, of how the Villari once ruled through harmony, not force, how they guided systems with wisdom until fear and ambition tore their unity apart. The box was their last hope, placed in her line to someday restore what was lost. Daniel listened, not like a spectator, but like someone who was being drawn deeper, not into her story, but into a shared silence between two strangers who no longer felt like strangers. Later that evening, he returned to the chamber where the box still floated, untouched by others since his brief encounter. Guards still stood at a respectful distance, and no one approached. As he stepped forward once more, not to try but to look, box was still glowing faintly, not active, not dormant. It pulsed like it was breathing slowly, waiting for something or someone not yet fully present. Reached out again, not touching, just close enough to feel the hum again, and then turned away, not yet ready, not yet sure. Behind him, Queen watched once more from a shadowed archway, saying nothing, her eyes reflecting the dim blue light of the box. In the days that followed, he returned often, not always alone, and not always with intention. Sometimes he brought tools to scan, sometimes only a mind full of thoughts. The Queen came to, not every time, but enough that he began to feel her presence before he saw her. They talked not just about the box, but about themselves, their homes, their past. He told her of Earth, its wild oceans, its storms and forests and mistakes. She told him of her childhood, the loneliness of royalty, and the weight of being chosen by a thing she never understood. Slowly, in those quiet moments among starlit corridors and silent chambers, something else began to open, not the box, but something between them, not fast, not forced, just like the box, waiting, slowly breathing, slowly knowing. Daniel had come to study a machine and found a mystery he could not measure. He had touched the unknown and found not just technology but a soul reaching back. And somewhere deep inside the box, something stirred again, as if it could sense the beginning of what it had waited for all along. Tension rose through the summit like rising heat in a silent desert, visible to none, yet felt by all. The moment the box responded to Daniel, the tone of the gathering had shifted. What was once a grand display of interstellar cooperation had started to crack beneath the weight of silent rivalry. Whispers moved faster than light. Now they wrapped themselves around every corner of the hall, every corridor where footsteps echoed a little too quietly. Some of the species had begun pulling their ambassadors back into private meetings. Others sent encrypted messages through hidden channels, because if the box had truly begun to open, and a human was the one causing it, then the balance of power could tilt in a way no one had prepared for. Daniel felt the change not in words, but in the way people walked around him, the way they stared too long before looking away, the way even his own team from Earth now treated him like a complication, more than a colleague. Their smiles had grown thinner, their voices more careful. He was no longer just an engineer, he'd become a symbol without asking for it. And symbols were dangerous, especially in the hands of frightened governments and jealous empires. One night, as he sat alone in his quarters, surrounded by half-finished sketches and quiet humming from his devices, a message came through, not through official channels, but on a private relay marked anonymous. It contained no threat, no demand, only a sentence that read, "The box belongs to no one, but many will die to claim what it hides." He deleted the message, but the words lingered. He had never wanted to be involved in anything beyond the puzzle of the machine. Yet now he stood at the edge of something bigger than he understood and deeper than anyone had admitted. The Queen remained a steady presence, not always seen but always nearby. She moved through the halls like someone untouchable yet still watching, and when they spoke it was never in public, always in quiet places, gardens of floating vines, chambers where music played through vibrations, not sound, hidden balconies overlooking nebulae through curved glass. She began to tell him more, not just of the box, but of the voices in her council, who feared what he represented. "They think if the box chooses you, then it will shift the power of the Valari to your world, and if that happens, it is not just my people who will change, it is the entire alliance. I never asked for that." Daniel said, "I just want to understand the box. That is why it listens," she replied, "because you are not trying to own it, you are simply present and patient and curious." But curiosity was no shield. Soon others began making their own moves. A delegate from a rival species approached him during a diplomatic dinner with a smile that didn't touch his eyes and a voice too sweet to trust. He spoke in riddles, offered him gifts, hinted at alliances, then leaned in close and whispered, "We know what the box is, we know what it needs, but if you think it will bring peace, you are mistaken. Some doors were sealed for good reason." Daniel said nothing, just stared at the stars projected above the table, wondering how many other civilizations had fallen chasing a mystery that was never meant to be solved. Began working on a new approach, one not based on tools or algorithms, but resonance. He remembered what the Queen had told him, that the box responded to emotion, not just logic. So he built a device not to decode signals, but to mimic frequencies generated by emotion, patterns of heartbeats, breathing, brainwaves when under stress or calm or joy. He tested it in silence, let it sync with his memories, with images of his childhood on Earth, with moments of love and loss, with his dreams of space, not as a place to conquer, but as a home to understand. When he returned to the box, it pulsed again, brighter. This time not just a blink, but a slow glow that traveled across its surface in spirals of blue and violet and gold. The guards stepped forward, uncertain, unsure of whether to stop him. But the Queen appeared, then silent and calm, and nodded once. They lowered their hands and Daniel stepped closer. He placed his hand not with force, but with stillness, and the box responded not with sound, but with sensation. Images filled his mind, not visions, but feelings, vastness, loneliness, curiosity, endless patience, and a sorrow that spanned millennia. It was as if the box had been waiting alone in silence for someone who could feel rather than take, someone who would open not just with fingers, but with understanding. Then the pulse faded again, leaving Daniel breathless, not drained, but changed. That night someone tried to kill him, a shadow in the hallway, a blade that whispered through the air, only to miss by inches. As Daniel fell back, a scream of metal against metal echoed as a defensive drone from his room intercepted the attack. The figure vanished before guards could respond, and the summit erupted in panic. But no one claimed responsibility, and the Queen refused to pause the challenge. In the days that followed, Daniel recovered, but something within him had shifted. His hands moved with more purpose, his thoughts sharper, his silence deeper. The Queen visited him often now, no longer just as ruler and observer, but as something else. Someone drawn by what was growing between them. He asked her once, why keep going? Why not shut the challenge down before it brings more violence? Because the box cannot be buried again, she said. Not now, not after it has begun to open. If we hide from it now, we lose not just its truth, but our chance to become more than we were. And Daniel understood the danger was real, but so was the hope. If he turned away now, it might never open again, not in his lifetime, not ever. So he stood once more before the box, not as a solver of riddles, but as someone ready to face what lay inside, even if it broke him, because some doors were meant to be opened, not for power, not for reward, but because what waited beyond them was not treasure, but truth, and deep Within the box, a new signal stirred, as if recognizing that the moment it had waited for across centuries was drawing near. Summit had changed from a place of ceremony to a storm held barely in silence. The polished walls now carried tension. In every reflection, every diplomat, every soldier, every silent observer had begun to feel that something greater was building. Something ancient and unfinished, and all of it centered around the one object that had waited longer than any of them could measure. The box now pulsing not constantly, but in quiet moments when no one expected it. Glowing like a heart buried deep in metal and mystery, Daniel moved through the halls like someone carrying a weight that others could not see. His steps no longer hesitant, his mind sharper than it had ever been. Not because he had found confidence, but because the box had become part of his thoughts. It whispered not in words, but in patterns that only he seemed able to hear and feel. The shapes, the pulses, the frequency. It was speaking to him, or perhaps remembering with him. Queen Ariel had changed as well, no longer just a figure of regal command. She had grown quieter, more reflective, as if part of her had already crossed a threshold the world had not yet seen. She walked beside Daniel in silence, most days their conversations becoming fewer yet deeper. She began sharing stories of the first builders, what little was known of them, tales preserved not in books, but in bloodline, in memory passed from ruler to heir as more of a warning than a legacy. They were not gods, she said once, as they stood before the box, but they thought they could hold time itself. Their machines were not made just to help, they were made to decide, to judge, to wait. And when their creators vanished, the machines were left behind, still waiting, still deciding, without a voice to guide them. Daniel listened to her with the understanding of someone who knew machines could carry pain when left alone. For too long the box was not evil, it was lonely, abandoned, waiting for someone, not just capable but willing to meet it, not with fear or desire, but with empathy. On the seventh day since the box responded, Daniel approached it again, not with wires or scanners, but with only the frequency reader he had built, synced now to his own heart, his memories and his breath. He placed it near the surface, and then stepped back, watching as the box slowly began to shift. No noise, no great lights, just a ripple, a flow across its skin like wind across water. And then it opened, not fully, but enough to reveal a surface within that shimmered like liquid. Thought a mirror that was not a mirror, and as Daniel stepped closer, it pulled him in, not physically, but mentally. His vision blurred, and then became something else. He stood in a vast place, not a room, not a memory, but a construct made of time and feeling. The stars above were frozen, the ground below undefined, and all around him moved symbols, images of life, death, connection, separation, every moment stitched together in a tapestry that felt older than creation itself. And then a voice came, not with sound, but with presence. Why do you seek? Daniel did not answer with words, he let his thoughts speak. His reasons, not for glory, not for love, not for power, but to understand, to see what had been hidden, to help if help was needed, and to listen if that was all he could offer. And the voice responded. Again, not with approval, not with denial, but with memory. He was shown worlds lost to ambition, civilizations undone by fear, species that chose silence over change, and always the box was there, watching, waiting, sometimes touched, often ignored, sometimes feared, mostly forgotten. It had carried every moment inside itself, every failure, every small act of courage, and now it had chosen to open again, because something in Daniel had matched what it had waited for. When he returned from that vision, his knees gave way, and he collapsed, but hands caught him, soft, steady, and when his eyes cleared, it was Ariel who held him, her face unreadable, but her grip unshaking. She said nothing as he caught his breath, only waited until he could stand again, and when he did, she looked into his eyes and said, "You were inside it, weren't you?" He nodded, and she stepped back, allowing him space to breathe. The box had not finished. It opened further this time, unfolding panels that revealed something at its center, a sphere of shifting light and code, a living artifact shaped not to destroy but to bond. It hovered above the platform, humming softly, and the Queen approached as well, her steps slow, her breath deep, as if something inside her was reacting to it. Daniel watched as the sphere responded to her presence, glowing brighter, casting shadows across the walls. He moved closer, and together they stood on either side of it, not speaking, just listening, and then the sphere pulsed once and released a wave of something not seen, but felt, a signal that passed through the summit like a breeze through fire, cold and warm, heavy and light. Every being in the summit felt it. Though none could describe it afterward, they would say it felt like a question, or a door opening, or a home remembered after being lost for too long. The Queen turned to Daniel, then her voice low and steady. "The artifact is not meant to be owned. It is meant to be joined, and it has chosen us both." Daniel felt the truth in her words. The sphere pulsed in rhythm with their breath, not as a machine, but as something more, something alive and ancient and waiting for a connection it had not known for ages. Later that night, the summit fell silent. No music, no speeches, just quiet, as if the stars themselves had chosen to hold their breath. The box no longer locked, the artifact no longer dormant, and the two who had unlocked it standing together, not as ruler and subject, not as alien and human, but as partners, bound not by law or title, but by the quiet agreement of shared understanding. The challenge was no longer a game, and the Queen no longer a prize. What had begun as a strange tradition had become something far more powerful, a joining of purpose and trust, a door not just to technology, but to a new path, one that neither of them could walk alone. And far above the summit, in the silent dark of orbit, something watched, a machine older than stars, a remnant of the first builders. Its long wait finally ended, because the box had opened, and the ones it had called for were finally ready. The summit no longer buzzed with politics or formalities. Instead, it stood in a deep stillness, one that reached beyond language, beyond diplomacy. Something had changed, not just in the hall or among the delegates, but across the very balance of known space. The box had opened, the artifact had awakened, and the Queen of the Valari had stepped forward, not as a ruler demanding obedience, but as a soul walking beside another, chosen, not by blood, not by birth, but by something older and wiser than any law. Daniel stood at the edge of the grand platform, staring out at the stars, displayed above like silent witnesses to a moment that did not belong to one world or one species. The lights of distant galaxies shimmered quietly, and below them the entire chamber held its breath. He had not come here for glory, and yet he now carried something that could never be undone. The artifact did not speak in voices or show visions anymore. It rested between him and Ariel like a quiet flame, steady and warm and real. It had accepted not just him, not just her, but the bond they had created between them. Word of the event spread faster than any light, faster than hyperlanes or broadcasts. It was not just that the box had opened, but that a human and a queen had unlocked it together. Rumors twisted it, reshaped it, but at the center of it all was a truth no one could deny. The first builder artifact had responded to trust, not strength, to cooperation, not ambition, to understanding, not control. And now its power flowed gently through the networks of the Valari, not as a weapon, but as healing, as harmony. Systems once broken began to repair on their own. Old machines, long dormant, began to glow. Ancient memory banks whispered with fragments of knowledge once thought lost forever. Daniel remained quiet through most of this. He let the scientists study the data, let the diplomats argue about what should come next. He did not try to lead or claim credit. He simply stayed close to the Queen, speaking with her often, but rarely in public. Their bond was still new, still fragile, but there was something solid beneath it, something no ceremony could fake or politic could twist. They had unlocked something ancient, but also something deeply personal. The Valari Council gathered once more, not to challenge the Queen's decision, but to witness it. And when Ariel stood before them, she did not wear her crown or the traditional armor. She wore a simple robe woven with symbols of her ancestors. Her voice was calm, steady, as she said, "The bond has been formed, not by law, not by force, but by the will of the artifact and the truth it revealed to It is not just about me or him, it is about what comes next for all of us. Some of the elders nodded, some remained silent, but none spoke. Against her the fear had passed, replaced by a kind of reverence, not just for the queen, not just for the human, but for the mystery they had touched and the ancient path they had made real. Again, a day was chosen for the joining, not a wedding in the way Earth knew it, and not a bonding in the way the Valari used to celebrate, but something between something. New, created not for appearances but for meaning. The hall was prepared not with gold or banners but with quiet light, soft wind flowing through the open chambers, music that came not from instruments but from the harmonics of the artifact itself, tuned to echo the rhythm of their shared memory. Daniel wore no armor, no official badge, only a simple dark garment that reflected the stars. The queen walked toward him through a corridor of light, her eyes steady, her breath slow, and when they met, no words were spoken. They placed their hands over the artifact, and it responded. Once more, not with brightness, not with spectacle, but with warmth that spread through the air like a wave of silent approval. The delegates watched but said nothing. In that moment, the challenge ended, the tradition fulfilled. But what remained was not an ending, it was a beginning. Later that night, after the ceremony had passed, and the crowd had returned to their chambers, Daniel and Ariel stood alone on a high balcony overlooking the gardens below. The stars above moved slowly, their paths unchanged by the choices made below, and yet Daniel knew something fundamental had shifted. "Do you think it will last?" he asked quietly. "Not just us, but what we've started." She turned to him, her expression soft, but certain. "It will last if we protect it, not with walls or weapons, but with honesty and care." The box gave us a gift, not of power, but of chance. We must be worthy of it every day. Daniel looked down at the artifact, now resting calmly in a containment field, not sealed, not locked, just resting like a living memory. The future was unknown, full of questions and possible dangers, but for the first time, he felt something deeper than curiosity. He felt peace, not the peace of silence, but the peace that comes when purpose and path finally align. So the story of the challenge ended not with conquest, not with victory, not with a prize, but with connection. A forgotten technology awakened, not by command but by the quiet bravery of a man who asked nothing and gave everything, and a queen who chose to trust when it mattered most. Together, they opened more than a box. They opened a door to a future where understanding could replace fear and unity could grow. From the simplest of truths, that sometimes the greatest power in the galaxy is not what you take, but what you share. And far beyond the edge of the summit, in places where no eyes could see and no sensors could reach, echoes of the opening traveled through the stars, waking other ancient minds, other forgotten machines, not with alarms or warnings, but with curiosity and hope, because the box had been opened and the galaxy would never be the same again. The end.